This is a doctor who, for the first time in looking at social media, she has an overarching theory on chronic disease and other than inflammation. So when you look at PubMed, people say that inflammation is the underlying mechanism of chronic disease, and I completely disagree with that because inflammation is simply the second step in the 4 steps of healing. So when you have an irritant in your body, like mercury or an infection, you have inflammation due to that irritant or that stressor, whatever you want to call it, and then your body's trying to heal. So in order to heal, you remove that irritant, you remove the infection, you remove the toxicity, the chemical, the metal, whatever it is. So you clean the body out, and then it can heal itself. So I've been saying that the mechanism of chronic disease is called lactic acidosis, as defined in the 1930s, and it's this mechanism, and there's Nobel Prizes behind this, by the way, when I say this, but it has to do with too much waste in the blood, not enough oxygen. Then therefore the blood is toxic and hypoxic. The cells don't get nourishment. They can't release toxins into the blood to be released by the body because the blood's already toxic. And you get this downward spiral of poor health. And this mechanism then causes cell death. Well, first cell starvation, cell death, tissue death, gland and organ death, and then body death. That's the mechanism of chronic disease. And when your organs aren't doing very well, they end up giving you symptoms. So each organ has a series of symptoms that it will present to you, like heart symptoms is chest pain and high blood pressure and other problems. Kidney symptoms, liver symptoms, pancreas symptoms, they're all different. And you can categorize them and look at people's histories and say, oh, it looks like you have a liver problem. Then you go see a liver specialist, or you see a pancreas specialist, or you see a heart specialist. And they're sort of ignoring this overall arching mechanism of chronic disease. And when you understand this whole mechanism, it's all the cells from head to toe. So when people are more and more ill from complex chronic illness, they'll have psychiatric issues, GI issues, nervous system problems. And she talks about POTS and dysautonomia, which are nervous system problems, and then muscular problems, and on and on and on. So you get this ability to step back and look at why the whole body's falling apart. Instead of going to see 10 different specialists and getting drugs for 10 different diagnoses, you actually understand the whole underlying mechanism of chronic disease. So I'm going to let her talk, and then I'll hit pause and make some comments. And I completely support what she's saying. I encourage her to keep going because she's about 20% there. So I'm going to fill in some data as she's going along. So I encourage her to keep going. I'm not bashing her at all. She's like thinking in a really good holistic viewpoint.
I am so nervous to make this video. If you have never seen my face or heard my voice, I am Dr. Erin Nance. I go by Little Misdiagnosed, and I primarily make educational videos about diseases that are primarily misdiagnosed in women. I'm talking about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, POTS, MCAS, dysautonomia, endometriosis. And over the course of generating over 1,200 videos, where at the end of every video, I ask viewers to share their story with me, I have analyzed over 100,000 comments, emails, DMs from you telling me your story. So for over 2 years, I have been collecting dots from hundreds of thousands of you so that I can connect these dots. And this has allowed me to come up with a theory, not a diagnosis, not medical advice, but a way to connect these dots that medicine typically treats separately. A theory is not a fact yet. Take germ theory, right? The idea in medicine that diseases were caused by these small microorganisms that could only be seen by a microscope. It took years before people accepted that germ theory was true. And what I'm calling this theory is the cellular barrier permeability theory, or the CBPT for short. I know it's a mouthful, but just stick with me.
So this is good. The cellular permeability theory, I love it. It's totally true. And so what about these membranes that's bad, that when they're permeable, what happens? Well, you get infections crossing through the barriers into the cells. You get toxins, metals, chemicals crossing through the barriers into the cells. And you can have nutrition in the cells leaving when it shouldn't be leaving. You want your barriers to be smart. So when I say barriers, that includes tissue too, not just cell membranes, but also the gut permeability problem. So leaky gut, you may have heard of that, or a leaky blood-brain barrier, or leaky connective tissue. So people get more sprained ankles or something, like their connective tissue is weak. And she specializes in that too. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome would be like weak connective tissue. And that's related to POTS, and it's related to dysautonomia and other things that she sees in her practice. So certainly the leaky barrier or leaky membrane theory, it's been known at least since the 1950s or 60s that even capillaries can be leaky. So when I talk about lactic acidosis, part of the problem there is that you have capillary dilation and then stagnation of circulation. So the reason why the capillaries dilate is because too much waste, here's W for waste, and not enough oxygen, here's O for oxygen. This is what happens. Oxygen goes down, waste goes up. That alone makes the arteries and capillaries dilate because the body's trying to get nutrition into the cells. So when you dilate the capillaries, then you have more oxygen supposedly in your blood going into the cells. But if your blood is toxic and hypoxic, then that doesn't happen. You end up with capillary dilation and then capillary stagnation. Now that theory, we're talking 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and in the 60s that converted over to capillary leakiness. So the capillaries can be the right size, they're not dilated, they're like this size, but then fluid, blood, serum, etc., red blood cells, white blood cells, they leave the capillaries and they go into the tissue, leaky capillaries, and then that causes a whole host of problems, including water retention, ankles, building up with fluid, swollen fingers, swollen waist, and it correlates with the weakness of the tissue. And your immune system is a lot of tissue and fluids that needs to be contained in their correct areas, like the lymphatic system, the lymph nodes. That lymph tissue needs to be in the lymph nodes and the lymphatic system. And then the liver and the kidneys, their barriers need to be correctly smart and strong and flexible so that urine does not go back into the body, or that fecal matter does not leak from the large intestine into the body. And then the biliary system from the liver, the gallbladder, like it needs to stay in the bile ducts and it needs to stay in the gallbladder until the body's ready to get rid of it into the intestines to digest food. And bile also is antimicrobial. It's also a lubricant for the intestines. So a basic breakdown of the body includes a breakdown of the barriers, the connective tissue. The arteries are more muscular. The ducts are more connective tissue. The veins are more of a connective tissue type tissue. But when all this breaks down, your body's breaking down. You could also say, well, your muscles are getting weaker. You're getting sarcopenia, meaning the muscle tissue is losing strength. You're losing muscle tissue. Also bones, like osteoporosis. This is just a breakdown of the body. So she's on the right track with this permeability problem. So let's continue to hear what she says.
The idea is simple. What if many chronic illnesses were not about one broken organ?
Beautiful. It's multiple organs breaking down and dirty blood. Don't forget about the blood. Think of that as an organ or a system.
And instead, we're about problems with the barrier systems not being tight enough.
In all the organs. Brain, blood-brain barrier, intestines, nervous system, biliary system, GI system, urinary system.
Our bodies depend on barriers. The skin barrier, the gut barrier, the blood-brain barrier, the blood-nerve barrier, to help control what things get in and what things stay out. In Ehlers-Danlos, that connective tissue is already more fragile. It depends on collagen. The barrier is already ripe for being more leaky. Then add an infectious or inflammatory trigger.
She is so on target, but she doesn't mention toxins. So the main causes of chronic disease are infections, toxins, and then bad diet. So you can eat food that's toxic, and you can eat food that weakens your immune system, and you can eat food that destroys your mitochondrial function, so therefore your body can't detoxify very well. So she's on the right target when she talks about infections, but there's more to it.
like a virus. Not an ongoing infection, but an immune-activated stressor to that barrier.
It can absolutely be an ongoing infection, though.
Now let's bring in mast cells. Mast cells literally sit at these barrier sites. Their job is to sound the alarm when something gets in when it shouldn't get in. But if these barriers are already leaky, then the mast cells are pulling the alarm constantly, nonstop, sending off these signals. And what we have is a body-wide systemic problem, a signaling problem that can look like MCAS, POTS, dysautonomia, GI issues, brain fog. Again, not because the tissues are damaged, but because there's a signaling problem. And it's why everyone's labs look normal, there's nothing abnormal that's found on imaging studies, and everyone is treated as if there's nothing wrong with them because they can't find anything wrong because there's nothing physically damaged that we can measure.
So she's really talking about malnutrition. I made this graphic in 2016, and I based this graphic on what the founders of medicine said back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And there are three things you have to address for chronic disease. The first one is causes. The second one is the mechanism of chronic disease. And the third one is symptoms, which come from organ dysfunction. So let's go to the first circle, the causes. There are three major causes. That's infections, toxins, and a bad diet, malnutrition. And then there are two minor causes. One is scars. The other one is body mechanical problems. So you might need a chiropractor, massage, etc., physical therapist. But let's go back to the three major causes. So when I talk about malnutrition, that can be measured very simply with this blood test called MVX+. And I've seen this with people, their protein intake is too low. When your protein intake is too low, that means you have leaky barriers and weak connective tissue.
There's even an area in the brain, the hypothalamus, which is a weaker barrier spot. And what does the hypothalamus do? It controls the autonomic nervous system.
Now, regarding malnutrition and this MVX+ blood test, it also can indicate B1 deficiency. And B1, vitamin B1, as B as in boy, is the most important nutrient for your nervous system. She's totally on the right track. She just needs more data.
It controls the autonomic nervous system, the heart rate, the blood pressure, the sweating, the release of hormones.
The autonomic nervous system responds really, really well to vitamin B1. In my 27-year career, vitamin B1 has created the greatest positive clinical effects I've ever seen on the most number of people. I figured this out in the summer of 2024. I've put hundreds of people on B1 since then. And so, yeah, just a nutrient that is endemically deficient, and a lot of people benefit by taking B1. So in the bigger picture, there's actually 7 steps to get somebody well. And I figured this out over my career, and adding B1 is in step 2.
This chronic immune signaling keeps the body in survival mode 24/7. And for some people who have underlying genetic differences like MTHFR variants, this makes them more disposed to leakier barriers, to not being able to handle oxidative stress. Now, what this theory is not, is it is not medical advice. It is not a diagnosis. It is not peer-reviewed yet. And it is not saying that everyone who has a medical problem has this same original cause.
True. Now, there are studies on permeability. There is intestinal permeability, and there is studies on skin permeability. So like toxins going through your skin. So there are studies on permeability being a problem. And back in the 60s and through the 80s, and even later, capillary permeability. So there are studies on this. But this overarching idea that she has, she's getting there.
But it is a jumping off point. It is a way for neurologists, immunologists, pain specialists, orthopedic surgeons like myself to think, are we all approaching the same problem but from different angles?
Absolutely, 100%. We have all these specialties, and that's the problem in medicine, is that one specialist will have one diagnosis on one patient, and another specialist will have another diagnosis On the same patient, they're just looking at different systems. So liver, kidneys, brain, etc. And now you have 10 diagnoses, and now you have 10 medications, and now you have polypharmacy. So you have 10 toxins you're taking as a therapy, which there's no science behind that. It's not ethical at all. It is the main problem with medicine is the specialists give drugs, and now you're on 10 drugs. Major, major problem. It doesn't improve health. It doesn't improve your life. It makes you sicker. It makes you die sooner. And if there's one thing on social media that people, really want is studies, and my answer is give me a study on polypharmacy. All the studies show that we're on too many drugs, and as people get off drugs, they actually get healthier. So it's like a pendulum swinging. So you have, in the 1920s, 30s, that's the vitamin era. That's the discovery of normal physiology, Krebs cycle, cellular function, mitochondrial function. And then 1940 started, that was the end, the beginning of the end of that era was 1940 when the government said that vitamin E and vitamin C are nothing but antioxidants. Then you had World War II. During that time, the Americans had penicillin, and that saved a lot of lives. And America made, billions of doses of penicillin. But the Germans, for example, they didn't have that. So that was one of the defining factors. There are many defining factors as to why America, contributed to victory in World War II, but pharmacy was part of it. So then in the 50s, steroids were invented, and people got a lot of relief, at least temporarily, by taking steroids. And antibiotics came of age. Now we're talking 60s, 70s, 80s, and the pendulum swung from the 1930s, like nutrition, vitamins, etc., all the way over to drugs. And now we're swinging back this way. I don't want it to swing all the way back this way. It needs to end up right in the middle. And we have RFK Jr. at head of HHS, and we have a new food pyramid, and he's going to release peptides, which should be released as supplements, not drugs. And he removed the black box label off of bioidentical hormones. So there's these really good things happening in the natural world. So the pendulum is swinging this way towards the middle. So when she's talking about this overarching, like we got this major problem in the body that's physical, then she's beginning to think like, okay, what am I missing? What are the specialists missing when we see symptoms and diagnose a disease? What are we missing in the whole body from head to toe? There's something that's going on from head to toe. And my answer is actually toxicity, too many infections, and malnutrition. I'm going to get more into toxicity here in a moment because that's the biggest problem. And then also like lack of protein in the diet.
And this matters because people are suffering in the cracks between specialties, where everyone looks normal, but nobody feels normal. This theory does not replace medicine. It invites medical experts to zoom out.
Now, zooming out has been the most important thing I've needed to do. In my practice, I'm a chiropractor focusing on nutrition. My tools are diet and supplements, and that's it. I quit taking insurance 20 years ago. And at that time, I thought to myself, okay, I need to be a better and better clinician because people aren't going to pay money to see me if I don't get them well. I have to get people well. But when I took insurance, the papers I filled out said, how many treatments does this patient need? And I would answer that question, but it never asked me when will the patient get better or will the patient actually get better? And I thought, well, this is a scam. Like they should be paying doctors to cure their patients, not just treat. The whole system's a scam when you only treat and not cure. So then I had to zoom out and I saw these patients. They had, let's say, fatigue, brain fog, depression, and fibromyalgia, and a deep ache in their calf muscles. How are those 5 things related? They are related. There was a moment in 2016 when I figured this out because I had toxic black mold. Thought I was dying. I had all these heart symptoms, crazy bad thoughts, trouble breathing, high blood pressure, terrible chest pain. And I looked back at my old books, looked behind my shoulder. These books are from the 20s, 30s, 40s, up to 1955. And in those books, it told me the mechanism of chronic disease. It's called lactic acidosis. Now the definition is different than what it was in the 30s. But also, lactic acidosis is this mechanism that occurs concurrently with mitochondrial dysfunction. So you may have heard people on social media talk about mitochondrial dysfunction. That's the core of chronic disease. Now, these are two different mechanisms. They happen at the same time. One happens in the mitochondria, mitochondrial dysfunction, and the other happens outside of the mitochondria, lactic acidosis. It still happens within the cells, but it's happening outside the mitochondria. Again, they happen at the same time. In the 30s, it was lactic acidosis. Now it's mitochondrial dysfunction, but they're both correct. It's dysfunction at that level within the cells, and the cells suffer. You don't get enough energy for detox, for immune system strength, for moving your body around. And it's not just the cells, then later becomes the tissues, the glands, the organs, and then the whole body.
So if you are a patient, if you are a clinician, if you are a researcher who also sees this overlap in many different chronic illnesses, please share your story, share your expertise. You never know who's watching these videos. Thank you so much for watching. I will be creating many more videos going into detail about certain aspects of this CVPT theory. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you all feel better.
Let's talk about this case study. This is from Bio1 Sciences. It's a nutritional supplement company. And in this person's case study, they scored their symptoms 0 to 10. And here you see in this white column, these are their symptoms. So it includes anxiety, panic attacks, shortness of breath, brain fog, decreased memory. So those are all brain problems. So maybe she might see a neurologist or a psychiatrist. The next one is fatigue, dizziness, lightheaded, mind racing, trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep. So that might be thyroid. So maybe she could see an endocrinologist. There's heart palpitations. Maybe she needs a cardiologist. Blurry vision. She needs an optometrist or ophthalmologist. Chemical sensitivities. So allergist, constipation, GI doctor, and headaches and bloating. So there's all kinds of medical specialties that she could see here, but she just started detoxing. And now if her score on a symptom was a 10, then it would be a red color. And if her score is a 0 or a 1, then it's green. And you can see over the course of from January of 2022 to November of 2022, so just less than a year, her scores went from red to green. All these symptoms in the white column got better because she's detoxing. This isn't taking drugs. It's not seeing specialists. It's cleaning the body out. So the chiropractic nutrition philosophy is clean the body, get rid of all the toxins, and the body will heal itself. So detoxing is one aspect of getting better. The other aspect is making sure that you fix the mechanism of chronic disease, and then you feed the organs to get rid of the symptoms. Here's another case study, again from Bio1 Sciences. Here's a list of symptoms: depression, anxiety, brain fog, decreased memory recall, anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt. All kinds of psychiatrists would drug that, or maybe a neurologist. And then negative self-talk, chronic fatigue, bloating, burping, heartburn, so GI problems, constipation, gut pain, and then headaches and pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, joint pain, knee pain, so rheumatology, and then shortness of breath, cardiology. So this person could see 4 or 5 different specialists. But again, over the course of this person, 2 years, they just detox, and these scores were 8, 9, 10. That's why they're red and orange. 2 years later, they're green because they're 0s and 1s. Just cleaning the body out and nourishing, but primarily cleaning the body out. So here's this case, again, from Bio1 Sciences. Thank you to them for setting this up. And this is from March of 2021 to May of 2023. So 2 years. And let's go over this person's symptoms. At the very top, it says incontinent aphasia, sleeping all day, severely dissociated, meaning they leave their body. This person had never weighed over 85 pounds in adulthood. By August of 2023, he was up to 102 pounds. So he gained almost 20 pounds. He was very sick. Let's look at this white column. I'm going to read off his symptoms: anxiety, depression, severe fatigue, severe brain fog, memory loss, all over constant muscle pain, severe constipation, constant cold hands and feet, sleeping 14 to 15 hours per night. He typed these in. He put these symptoms in. Total loss of bladder control, constant intestinal pain, flaky skin, acne, hair loss, tingling, throbbing, veins. And so they were red, they were 10s and 9s, and then 2 years later, they're green, meaning they're 1s and 2s and 3s. There's no drug that can do this. This is complex chronic illness. Step 1, clean. Detox. Get the garbage out of the body. That includes parasites, mucus, virus, bacteria, Lyme, candida, mold. It includes heavy metals, chemicals, all the chemicals. There are tens of thousands of chemicals in the market. They're in the environment, they're in our food, they're in the air, they're in our water. People with complex chronic illness have usually at least more than 3 chemicals. They have at least 1 heavy metal, and they have multiple mycotoxins from mold. I see people with dozens and dozens of toxins. We use a test called total tox burden to see all the toxins. Here's a 7-step blueprint to optimal health. It addresses malnutrition, which is step 1, and that alone can increase the strength and intelligence of the membranes and reduce the permeability. Then the vitamin B1 and increasing mitochondrial function is in step 2. And then step 3 is preparing the body for detoxing. Step 4 and 5 is cleaning the intestines and helping the immune system get rid of all kinds of organisms. Detoxing starts at step 6. Then cleaning out the cells is step 7. Step O is lifelong optimization, meaning maintaining your health and keeping health improvement going. I made it into an infinity sign because you're going to have more toxins appear as you go through your days and years. I experienced this myself. I had toxic black mold in 2016, and then in 2024, I had a gas leak at my house. Both of them caused the same symptoms: swelling feet, cold, high blood pressure, chest pain, numb left arm, trouble breathing. And I saw a cardiologist. I could have gone to see a pulmonologist, a neurologist, a psychiatrist. I could have seen all these specialties and they would have given me drugs, but the cause was mold, and then the cause was a gas leak. And both times I got EKGs. I went to urgent care twice in 2016. I went to the ER in 2024. I had the same symptoms, but they didn't ask me about what was the cause. They were looking for blocked arteries. That's what they do. They look for a stroke. They look for pathology. They didn't look for toxicities. Now, some people are chronically ill from chronic organism. So you get a blood test and you find Lyme, you take an antibiotic for 2 weeks and it doesn't work. Or they find candida and you take an antifungal drug for 10 days and it's not enough. You have to heal the body. You got to do the 7 steps. And the reason why I made it into this infinity sign is so that you go from step 1 to step 7, and then you keep going. You may have to do this a few times over the course of several years. Or you finish all 7 steps, and then 2 years later you realize, I got to get rid of some more parasites or something. So that's why it's an infinity sign. You're always working on your health for the rest of your life. You can measure these things using this test. It's called MVX Plus. We charge $89 for it. I have patients run this every 6 to 8 weeks. It determines your most pressing subject, whether it's malnutrition, infection, toxicity, mitochondrial dysfunction, or inflammation. This test measures it. It guides your progress. It puts you down the right path. It gives you a score for your overall health. It also scores these subjects I just told you about. And it's not just your thyroid. It's not just your liver. It's your whole body from head to toe. And you could be really healthy. You would still benefit from this test. This is not just for sick people. I've recently been using AI to ask the big questions about overall health, like taking a step back and what if the full body is breaking down? Like, what is the cause of that? What's the mechanism of that? And AI says the mechanism is skin permeability, and it also says inflammation. Okay, it's about 10% there. It's not at 100%. It's only 10%. It's these guys. Look at these books behind me. These are the books from the 20s up to 1955. They had better answers. They saw the whole body holistically. They understood the mechanism. They understood some of the causes. Other causes like toxicity came later because in 1930, all farms were organic, and the number of chemical toxins in the environment and in the marketplace were very low. Mercury wasn't discovered to be a problem in the human body until the 1980s. That was discovered by Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. But at least these guys gave us this overall viewpoint. So our standard medical research and articles, the journals, the AIs, they're not there yet. They don't understand what these guys knew back in the 30s. They had this bigger picture. They were able to zoom out and see the mechanism of chronic disease. They're able to see some of the causes of chronic disease, especially with the diet and the infection/organisms. They understood parasites. They understood bacteria. They didn't know Lyme because that wasn't discovered until 1979, 1980. So I'm putting together all of medical research for 100 years, and what's appropriate for you is to be determined by you. And when you go to an MD, they are well trained to give you a diagnosis. So you can say, oh, I have this rash. They'll call the rash a name. But in the meantime, what about your arthritis, your pain, your brain fog, your lack of memory recall, all these symptoms from head to toe? Well, you got to go see another specialist, and they're going to give you another drug. You don't want to end up on polypharmacy. This is the viewpoint. This is the overall arching viewpoint that everybody's looking for when it comes to complex chronic illness and the prevention of complex chronic illness. Now, if you have a disease, let's say a heart problem, and your ejection fraction is low, and you see a structural cardiologist and you see an electrical cardiologist, they're going to specialize in giving you the exact right diagnosis. That's valuable. And if you have a cancer, get the exact name and genotype of that cancer. That's valuable too. But then you have to step back and say, well, why did this happen? Why did I end up with this heart problem? Why did I end up with this cancer? And it's valuable to address all of that. You want to address the pathology too when you get that, but you also want to address the thing that caused it in the first place. Okay, if you need help with your health and you want to contact my office, I'm putting the phone number at the end of this video. We've seen 60,000 patients in the last 5 years. We're really good at improving health using only diet and supplements. Those are our two tools.